Elevate your next tea party event with this simple balloon garland on a circle backdrop stand. All the balloons are tied into clusters of 6. To start, inflate an 11-inch and 17-inch balloon at the same time to a variety of sizes. That will give us a nice organic look. Then you're going to let a little bit of air out and press them either against the table or your torso to make sure they're nice and round. Then tie them into a pair by wrapping the nozzles around twice and tying them in a simple knot. This is the first of 3 pairs we need to make to create the cluster. The next 2 pairs will be made from 2 11-inch balloons that I'm going to inflate anywhere between 7 and 9 inches in diameter. Round them off, tie them into a pair, and then make a second pair in the same way. Now we're going to join all 3 of these pairs into the cluster by taking our first larger pair and one of the 11-inch pairs and overlapping them so that the nozzles touch in the center. Then twist one balloon from each of those pairs around each other, and that will lock it into a quad. To this, I'm going to add the second all 11-inch pair by nestling the nozzles of this pair against the nozzles of the quad, and then twist one balloon from the pair and one balloon from the quad around each other, and that will secure all of these balloons together into our first large cluster. I made one of these clusters in each of my 4 colors. Next, I'm going to make a cluster from all 11-inch balloons that are inflated anywhere between 5 and 7 inches in diameter, giving me a slightly smaller cluster of 6 balloons. This will help me make the taper from the large end of my garland up towards the tiny end where the teapot is. I repeated this step until I had 2 of these clusters in each of my 4 colors. For the tiny clusters, I'm going to be using these 5-inch balloons and a hand pump to inflate them with 2 pumps of air or to about 3.5 inches in diameter. I find it really helpful to take the first balloon that I inflate and tuck the nozzle under one of my fingers holding the pump while I inflate the second balloon to the same size. Then I can easily tie them together in a pair and only have to tie 1 knot instead of 3. Then take 3 of these pairs and join them together just like we did all of our other clusters. In total, I'm making 3 of these clusters in each of my 4 colors. To tie the tea party theme together, I created this large teapot from a sheet of foam board, cut it out, and then covered it in this gorgeous floral vinyl, so it looks like an antique. If you'd like to make your own teapot and teacup set, I'll have printable templates available in the description box below. I'm using a 6-foot tall gold circle backdrop arch, and to that I'm going to attach my teapot to the upper right hand side. Once I'm happy with where it's sitting, I'm going to secure it in place with a couple pieces of clear packaging tape joining the arch frame to the back of the teapot. I'm going to create a mini balloon garland using a 260 balloon as the center string. Remove all the air from the 260 balloon and tie the end in a knot, and then about 3 inches in from that end, we're going to tie the 260 balloon to the center of our first cluster. It's important to leave this tail as that's how we'll attach this end of the garland to the spout of the teapot. Where the rest of that 260 balloon comes out of the first cluster, take your next cluster and nestle it right up against the first, pulling the 260 through the center of this new cluster and wrapping it in a figure 8 pattern around 2 of the balloons. Continue nestling clusters together, pulling the 260 up to the center and wrapping them in a figure 8 until we've got 5 clusters all together in a nice garland. Depending on where the teapot is hung on the arch frame, you may need a longer or shorter garland to get from the spout of the teapot to the left-hand side of the circle arch. Ideally, you want the garland to either hit at the midpoint of the arch or just above that. I'm going to mark this location by slipping my first all 11-inch balloon cluster onto the frame so that the nozzles touch the metal frame, and then take 2 balloons with the frame in between them and twist them around each other. This will secure the cluster onto the frame. Now I'm going to attach the mini balloon garland to the spout of the teapot. Take that tail end we left a little long and attach it to the teapot with a piece of clear packaging tape on the back side of the spout. Then I'm going to nestle the first balloons of that mini balloon garland around the spout so that they're nice and snug. Depending on the placement of the teapot, you may have to add a little bit more of a 260 string and attach a couple more balloons to reach the frame. We want to make sure we have a nice gentle curve from the spout of the teapot down towards the arch. I'm going to extend my mini garland by attaching 2 of my all 11-inch clusters to the end of it so it'll reach the frame. This was my initial solution to add a little bit more length, but after stepping back and looking at the overall design for a little while, I decided that this was too harsh of a balloon size change between the tiny 3.5 inch and those 5 to 7 inch balloons. So you'll see me tweaking this later on. Just know you want to make sure you get a nice gentle curve and everything attaches to the side of our arch. The rest of the balloon garland will be attached directly to the circle arch frame. Once I've added the fourth, all 11-inch balloon clusters, I'm then going to switch over to my larger clusters and attach it to the frame. The bottom of the arch is too close to the floor to slip our balloons underneath, so I'm going to take an empty 260 balloon and tie it in a double knot to the frame. Then use the tail ends of that 260 to attach our balloon clusters along the bottom of the arch. Nestle the cluster onto the frame so that the nozzles of that cluster are touching the metal frame. Then pull the 260 tail up through the center of the cluster and wrap it around 2 or 3 of the balloons in a figure 8 pattern, and that will secure the cluster in place. Repeat this process for any cluster that may be too close to the floor. Once I've added all 4 of my larger clusters, I'm then going to attach the foam board teacup in approximately the place I want it to be in the final design. I'm going to use an empty 260 balloon that I've tied the ends together to make basically a giant rubber band. Then I'm going to tape that with a little bit of clear packaging tape to the back of my teacup. Slip that loop over one of the balloons in the garland, approximately where you want the teacup to sit. Now I'm going to add a few more balloons around the base, so the teacup is going to get jostled a bit, but I wanted the cup there first so I could add these extra balloons around the base to nestle it in. Using more 260 loops, I'm going to attach the remaining 11-inch clusters anywhere the garland needs to be filled out a little bit, including around the base of the arch to cover the feet of the stand. Now I'm going to fill in any gaps in my garland with the mini balloon clusters. I'm going to take one of those 260 loops, stretch it over one of the balloons in that cluster, and then attach it to one of the balloons that's already in the garland. Now I'm going for a color blocked look, so I'm adding all of my tiny clusters on top of balloons of the same color. The mini balloon clusters are a great way to add more texture and visual interest to our balloon designs. If you're unsure where to add in these clusters, you can always set it approximately where you think it should go, and then take a couple steps back and look at the overall design to see if it makes sense. Because we're tying these clusters into the garland instead of using adhesive, we can always adjust the placement until we're happy with where they're sitting. To give my garland that graceful taper that I'm looking for, I went ahead and removed the 5th cluster from that mini balloon garland, and then re-inflated another cluster in that pink color to 4 inches in diameter, and then followed that up with another white cluster that's inflated to 4.5 inches in diameter. This gives me that beautiful gentle taper that I can then attach to the larger 11-inch clusters, and then blend this entire joint together with more of those 3.5-inch tiny clusters. And now this elegant circle arch is ready for the finest of tea parties. You can find the teapot and teacup templates linked in the description box below. And if you enjoyed this project, you should check out this video. So until the next time, remember, stay creative, everybody.